Yes, there'll be no reason for Labour to listen to anything. I mean, they'll just be this elected, but unaccountable quangocracy, won't they? As outlined in the New Britain document that Gordon Brown's kindly written
Mm.
for us. So they'll be following that, changing the House of Lords. They'll probably get rid of elections. They'll probably get rid of anything. They will never be able to be toppled. I mean, I'm talking about Farage as king, but really Starmer will be behaving more like a king, is my guess. Um, yeah. So yeah, maybe it will pressure people to switch to PR. What about Kemi? You love Kemi. Is she going to end up leader by default, or is it going to be Cameron or something weird?
Yeah, I think it. I mean, I think Kemi must be the favourite, not least because so many of her rivals are likely to lose their seats. Um, uh, I mean, it might the prospect of leading, a party which is going to be so neutered, and will, it'll be kind of a thankless task leading a parliamentary Conservative Party of not much more than 100 strong. They won't be able to do much. They won't be able to do much in the way of opposing the government. I mean, it'll be pretty unappealing prospect. And I guess if Starmer does win, a 250 plus seat majority, then the chances of defeating him in 29 are pretty remote. At which point, whoever the leader of the opposition has been will have to then fall on their sword, give someone else a go. So, it might not. Maybe maybe Kemi will think, "Crikey, this is such an unappealing prospect. Maybe I won't throw my hat into the ring." But I think she probably will, and I think she looks likely to be Rishi's successor at this point.
All right, maybe we'll move on from the polls, as fun as they are, and do our other story, which is sort of a general story about some of the Tory madness, the Rishi campaign madness, really, Starmer campaign madness, and also the question time, which I don't know if you watched, but the quite boring leaders question time. Did you not watch it? I
I
guess
didn't
you're
watch
over in
it.
New
No,
Zealand, so it's quite hard for you.
yeah,
I can
time
tell you what
differences. Yeah,
happened.
really
Not
difficult.
much. It was pretty absurd. I mean, Rishi. I mean, maybe should we get into that? Well, basically, Rishi was. It was Rishi Starmer and Ed Davey and John Swinney, who no one cares about. I was thinking, like, why do we have to watch it? It was like watching, when you're in Scotland, you have to watch. You ever go to Scotland? I used to go as a kid to Scotland, and you'd have to watch like the Scottish version of Match of the Day or whatever. I'm like, why am I
Right.
looking at Kilmarnock and Dundee United? All this rubbish. And you're like, oh, I'm trapped in Scotland, so I can't watch normal football. So it's kind of similar. It's like, why do I have to look at John? I'm in London. Is my antenna malfunctioning? Obviously, I don't watch I don't pay for the BBC, but I was watching it through a shop window. But I'm like, why do I have to see John Swinney when I'm in London? It doesn't make any sense, so it's madness, really,
and
and
why and,
especially
and
because
why
Farage wasn't in it.
yeah, why wasn't Farage in it? Why John Swinney and not Farage?
Well, exactly. It's a stitch up, isn't it? The whole thing's ludicrous. He was saying he was demanding to be in it. Yeah, and if it's going to be just Sunak and Starmer, I think there's an argument where you can say, yeah, we don't recognise Farage yet,
Hmm.
but Sunak, Starmer, Ed Davey, you're already scraping the barrel a little bit, and then John Swinney, he's been in there 10 seconds. I mean, yeah, Farage has only just become officially leader, fine, but no one cares about Swinney, and no one can vote for him in most of the country. I mean, what is it all about? Who
Mm.
cares about Swinney? So the SNP are going to get destroyed anyway. So that was a complete joke and totally boring. And Ed Davey, he just sort of does his nice bloke routine, doesn't he? Like, yeah, he's talking about stopping knife crime. Can you imagine the Lib Dems stopping knife crime? Like, hey, come on, mate, put it down. It's not worth it. You know what I mean? I just imagine the patheticness of their attempt to stop knife crime. In fact, I made another point about that. I need to find this actually because I was just live tweeting the whole thing because apparently I've got no life at all. And I just said, imagine looking out at the collapsing dystopian hellscape shithole that is Britain 2024 and thinking the Lib Dems will fix this. And I'm sorry for the language, but imagine that. Oh, and also Davey said Lake Windermere, which is a bit of a problem for voters in my hometown because Mere means lake. So, of course, it's a tautology to say Lake Windermere. You have to say things like on Windermere, and it can be confusing because you've also got the town Windermere. So, I told people the way to differentiate is how wet are you. I mean, if you're in the town Windermere, you probably are wet because it probably is raining, but you're probably not as cold and wet as if you were in the actual lake. And therefore, that's a good way to know. But and then someone was arguing with me about what Windermere was and how much they seemed to claim it was just the area around the train station. I was like, you're telling me about Windermere, even though I spent 7 years, 7 bitter years there at school and grew up there. My parents still live in the area. My grandparents both lived in the area. But Anyway, sorry, that's a digression. But anyway, he said Lake. He said Lake Windermere. So that's another reason not to vote Davy. Although they do like Tim Farron up in Cumbria. But anyway, I'm
Well,
rambling about the question time. Go on.
one person who is kind of looking out at the dysfunctional hellscape that is contemporary Britain, and thinking maybe the Lib Dems are the answer is Rory Stewart. Did you see that?
Yeah.
He told the Observer in an interview on Sunday that he said, "I guess my hand will float over Labour, but will probably come down on Lib Dems or the
Oh,
Greens."
the Greens.
Um,
Yeah, I'd
the
like a sort of
Greens,
guy that screams "Allo Akbar" while occasionally worrying about Wales. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I know people
the
knew he
guy,
wasn't a Tory, but not even Lib
yeah.
Dem. People are like he's a Lib Dem. Like, oh no, no, hold your beer. I'm a Green.
I know that was a shock. I mean, yeah, it's one thing saying you're considering voting Lib Dem. I mean, that's quite bad. But to say that you might vote Green,
I know.
you
What
wouldn't
an
have thought that
oddball.
anyone remotely sensible would even consider voting Green. But
Yeah, he'll
yeah,
probably vote Labour. He just didn't want to say. I don't know. I don't want to besmirch him. He was always an
do,
odd
do,
sell,
do,
wasn't he? This weird kind of explorer figure, possibly a spy that looks kind of like a ventriloquist doll.
Florence of Arabia, I've heard him described as.
Right.
Um, but do you think we can now submit a complaint to Ofcom? You know, here's the proof that there's nothing balanced about putting the rest is politics as a sort of on Channel 4 news. That is a breach of the broadcasting code. That is two socialists discussing the general election campaign. It isn't a Tory and a socialist. That we can finally dispense with that illusion. Rory is every bit. If he's thinking of voting Green, he's every bit as left wing as Alistair Campbell. He
Yeah,
may
that's a
even
good
be
point.
to the left of Alistair Campbell. The idea that it's in any way a balanced podcast is now for the birds, I think.
Yeah, I think that was always completely absurd. They keep trying to get Farage
Yeah.
on, to be fair, though. Campbell's obsessed with getting Farage on, which tries to do by calling him a wimp and insulting him. And it's like, yeah, that'll be good for Farage to come onto a podcast where he's absolutely hated and just be attacked by you for an hour. I mean, how's that going to help him in any way? But then again, maybe it would be good. He should come on. He definitely should have been on the BBC thing because it was so boring. They were all so similar. We needed Farage saying they all sound the same. And frankly, I don't believe a word. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that none of them mentioned immigration? But did you see, by the way, that campaign video that he put out? Vote for a voice in Parliament that will give a real opposition to Labour. And he's there with his dog
Yes.
in the countryside. It was so good. I
Yeah.
was saying it was in line with the bucolic greats of English history. Tolkien and E.M. Forster and D.H. Lawrence and Wind in the Willows, Clarkson. It had a very kind of people compare him to Toad of Toad Hall. It solidified his archetype as well. It kind of changed his archetype because he's got the kind of city boy archetype, and it's this metamorphosis to the country Farage. Just there on a park bench with his dog and some sort of windbreaker just going. Nothing works. Nothing works in the country. I'm out here enjoying the beauty of England, but nothing worked. It was just so perfect. It was so good. Everything he's done on
Mm.
the campaign, every video and tweet has just been so good.
Yeah, well, that was, I think, the surprising thing about. I mean, maybe you're right, and this clip of him being interviewed by Nick Robinson talking about the Ukraine rather. Maybe it's harsh to say that was a misstep. It was at the beginning of the campaign. He doesn't shy away from defending previous positions he's taken and so forth, but he did sort of double down on it afterwards. He gave this interview to ITV Tonight, which I think broadcast on Monday night before. Well, at the time of our recording this, it hasn't yet been broadcast, but he talks about it again and he says that actually we should be looking at some kind of peace treaty now and so forth. I mean, it's like he's still talking about it. Why is he still talking about it? I mean, as you say, everything apart from that has been note perfect, including that party political broadcast. He seems to have been kind of absolutely kind of capturing the zeitgeist in a way that none of the other political leaders are. And that's why reform have been surging in the polls. And it was exciting, but now he feels he's really kind of, for the first time in the campaign, put a foot badly wrong, and it's disappointing given he up until this point seems such a fleet-footed operator.